stairs here. First thing you're going to need is a bunch of pre-manufactured treads. I picked these up at Rona. You can get them when they come on sale. There's a finished side that's nice and clean, and there's an unfinished side. And these came in 42-inch lengths. I cut them down to match my stairs. I needed them. The other standard is 36-inch. I just cut them down because I need about 37.5 inches. Another thing that I've done, I've added this dado at the bottom. It's 1/2 inch. And on the back face, I've added a rabbet here. Now what that does is on my riser, I can put that riser into that dado. So when you're looking at the stairs this way, if there's any sort of contraction, you're not going to see a little gap in there. And at the same time, this dado here will go into, well, this should be this way, will go into the next tread. Now these are upside down, mind you, and that locks into the next tread, and then you can screw in behind. So for this particular video, I'm not going to show you how to cut these down. If you're watching this, you already know how to do this. This distance here, your nosing, is going to be different on every single staircase, as well as the thickness. These are standard 10.5. I've cut this down to about 10 7/16. Every stair is going to be different. The next thing you're going to need is a bunch of wedges. Steve Maxwell of Bailey Line Road has a nice little video on how to mass produce wedges. I have two different thicknesses. I have one for the tread itself, it's nice and thin, and then I have one for the riser as well, it's a little bit thicker. Now the reason I use a thicker wedge for the riser is because my bit is 3/4 of an inch. So I've got 1/2 inch material here, and I've got another 1/4 inch material on the wedge. So that way my router bit, I can use a 3/4 inch router bit as opposed to a 1/2 inch, and that's going to save you a lot of time. I'll show you the router bit setup here. I'm using a plunge router here. It's got a Freud bit. It's a 3/4 inch with a 3/8 cut, and it's got a following bearing here. You can get a 3/4 inch with a 3/8 cut, or I've got a 3/4 inch follower with that cuts 1 inch down. You might need this one to make the template, and I'll show you the template now. This is the template I'm using to route out the stringers. Now I've made a master template, which is here. Now what you do is you make your master and then immediately make your secondary piece, a second sample right here. Take your master, go throw it away. Because if you ever destroy this by gouging just the side a little bit, you're in a lot of trouble. Now, I'm not going to show you how to make a template like this. There's tons online. I think his name is John Matheson, does a really good one. So what's happening is my tread, this one of course doesn't fit. It's too tight. Every piece needs a little bit of sanding. So my tread here, I've got one that fits, is driven home hard. And you can put your wedge, the wedge fits in behind quite nicely. And then your riser, see how I've left that 1/4 inch space right there? You have enough room to slide it up on the angle, put it into the dado, and then as you push it forward, it locks in to the next tread, and then you can take your wedge, put it in, and drive it home. Now this is the secondary one. You can already see I screwed up here. If there's one of the slightest little router marks on the front face, which is the visible face, that router is going to follow that, and you're going to see a line there or some sort of groove every single time. So it's always important to have two. This one I've left a little bit longer here so that my router can fit on top. My router can fit on top without going over the sides. And then my 3/4 inch patterning router bit is going to fit in there. This one obviously won't because it'll hit the table, but will fit in there and follow that pattern around perfectly. Here are the stringers that I'm going to be using. They're 10.5 inches wide, 1.5 inches thick, and this is how they came to me. They start out as 2 inch and they're sanded on one side, jointed, and planed down to 1.5 inches thickness. For those of you who know how to use CAD, this is my layout that I'm using to map these stairs out. And you can see the main stringer is outlined here. I'm going to have a nosing piece up at the top. There's just enough space for one nosing piece to be left at the landing. And then down here, as I mentioned, this riser is going to be shortened the thickness of your subfloor. Now my subfloor, I still have to add 3/4 of an inch, so everyone's going to be different, and that's where I've left it there. I have this line and this line, which are going to be cut, and that represents this line and this line there, and that's just a simple determine this angle with an angle finder and draw the line. I know this is going to be 90 degrees, perfectly square. The next thing I've done is the distance 2.685 from the front of the stringer to the front of the first riser, and I've made that measurement here, so that right there is 2.65. I know the height of my rise, which goes to this point, and this secondary point here is 1 inch below because that's the thickness of my tread, and that's where my pattern's going to fit in. The distance of my front face to the back, which is 14 1/8, and that's going from this point up here to the back face of my stringer here, 14 1/8 roughly, and I've gone from that same point here down to here, and that's roughly 10 3/4. So what I can do is get my square with my stair tremels there. Tremels? Is that the word? I can now start to mark this out. So I'm going from the original, the first riser. I know my run is 9 inches, so I make a mark at 9 inches. I move my square along. At my 9-inch mark, I can sketch a line. From that, measure over 9 inches. Slide it along. Oops, hit my sawhorse. Make the next mark. And based on my drawings, I know that I've set this at 10 3/4. Put my tremel there, and 14 1/8. Set my tremel there, and this is always going to be the same. Slide it along. I've laid out my lines every 9 inches and 6 and roughly 7/8 for my rise. You can see how I've done it all the way here until I get to the very end. And here's my last riser here, and here is the cut line for the top of my stringer. So this is going to be the finished floor, and I have enough room to make a nosing piece here which will tie into the floor. So over that whole distance, I'm out by roughly a 1/16 of an inch right there. So as I laid it out with the square, I know the tops of my lines. This is the visible line that you're going to see when the stairs are finished. So here's the front of my riser, and here's the top edge of my tread. Obviously there's going to be some nosing here, however that's where it aligns. So because my pattern, I know this face and this face is square, I can now line those two faces up with the lines. I'm taking a scrap piece of straight lumber. You can throw it underneath. Take a clamp, clamp it, and now you can use that as a track. I'm hitting my sawhorse here, to drive that along, and your stairs and your cutouts are always going to be in the same location. Once you have all the routing done, you should have 2 mirror image stringers. If they're not a mirror image, you have a problem. What's left to do now is just to cut your outside lines, marking the overall length of the stringer. I'll cut to the outside with a skill saw, or you can use a track saw, and then I'll sand everything over. Now the visible face here that you're going to see, I'm going to sand that to 220 grit. And this leading edge, there's a saw mark on there, I'm going to sand that away as well. Take my hand plane, get rid of this sharp edge here. And for those who are building a staircase that's in between two walls, that's fine. Mine's going to be visible from the outside, so I'm just going to flip it over. I'll sand the back face as well. And that's it for this video. The next video we're going to be showing assembling it and how to put it together.